Welcome to the Handyman Pros Radio Show, home improvement and maintenance tips from the pros. This episode, we could have nailed it, but screw it. We could go on for hours. Thanks for listening to another edition of the Handyman Pros Radio Show, where our goal is to help you save time, money, and aggravation. This edition is entitled, We Could Have Nailed It, But Screw It. We Could Go On for Hours, a discussion about specialty tools. To help explain, I'm here with my ever-cheerful co-host and old buddy John. John, what's been going on this week?
Hey, Larry. Great to be here again this week. Well, not a whole lot going on this week. I just got back from Florida. I had to go down there for a family matter, but it was nice to get out of the cold and get back into shorts again.
Well, that sounds fabulous. We just got back from a trip to the D.C. area, and it was freezing, so it was not so good. But speaking of freezing, it takes us into this show because we've done this series now. This is the third part series of our discussion about tools because we're doing this for the Christmas season, as I remember. Or the holiday season.
Yep.
The gift-giving season. So what were we going to discuss in this third part of our tools? We were talking about specialty tools.
Yeah, so I thought, I had a little list here that I put together that we can talk about, and I think it's the next kind of progressive step to what the homeowner needs, and for maybe a little bit bigger projects, make things a little bit easier and exciting. That would be table saws. Talk about some miter saws.
A little cleanup. Yeah,
a little cleanup as a shop vac, router, and possibly a router table, and so a couple of various sanders.
So we did want to just explain to our listeners, we've kind of focused on tools that revolving around woodworking. We're going to do some shows on metalworking in the future. It's just kind of a very different set of tools, I guess you would say.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's the next step, a little bit bigger tools.
Yeah. A little more, a little different. Welders.
More power, maybe.
More back on the more power. So first one we were going to talk about was table saws.
Right. One of the things is that if you're going to do some pretty good-sized projects, that a table saw just really does come in handy. It's an awesome tool to have, very precise cuts, and easy to use. Now, what I have and what I found, because I don't have a great, big, huge shop, is I have a small table saw that I put on a table that we both carry.
Yes. You have a tabletop table saw.
And we have a tabletop table saw, and I clamp it down, and it works like a champ. I learned that a long time ago when I saw some guys on a construction site that were doing a lot of construction, and all they had was a small table saw.
Small little table saw, yeah.
And that they had thrown in the back of their truck.
I have a similar one. Mine happens to be on wheels, and it has its own. It sets up itself, but it's effectively the same one. It just has wheels.
Yep, it's like 10-inch, 12-inch. It's a tremendous little piece of equipment.
So, give some ideas of what do you use the table saw for? What are the advantages to a table saw, say, over a circular saw or a traditional, what I always call a saber saw or circular saw?
Well, you get more precise cuts. A hand saw or like a skill type saw is great for the job site. Cut big pieces of wood and things like that. But when you get down to some real precision, like if you're building little furniture, some furniture, cabinets, whatever, you really need to step up to a regular table saw so you can make some very precise cuts. And you can also it's easier to rip larger pieces of material too, but you can set it up with different gauges and fences and things like that.
Yep. So that's probably one of the biggest differences is the ability to do large cuts with great precision. So if you're cutting, I know I use mine a lot to rip plywood. So if I'm doing panels and things like that, I can get it's completely with the fence. A fence, folks, if you don't know what a fence is, it's actually a what would you call it? It's like
guide.
A wall. Yeah,
it's a guide. It's a wall, if you will.
And it clamps to the tabletop of the table saw, and it actually gives you a precise distance between the blade and it gives you the precise distance of what you're trying to cut. So if you want to cut, 12-inch, consistently want to cut pieces that are 12 inches long over an 8-foot spread on a piece of plywood. You can do that much easier with a table saw than trying to do it by hand. It just is one of those things that it's very, very nice. And to your point, John, you said if you're doing furniture, I guess we'd call it, what's the precision level with a table saw compared to like a circular saw is usually what, about a 1/4 inch, maybe an 1/8 of an inch in precision?
Yeah, I mean, you can get down less than a 1/16 and even better than that. I mean, now it all depends on what kind of table saw that you have.
Right.
And they range from, $100, $200, all the way to sky's the limit. If you want a German-made, big, huge table saw. But, when you're doing quality furniture and precision cuts, that will give you that ability to do that.
Any multi-uses you can get out of a table saw, John? Can you put any other blades on it and do other types of...
Yeah, you can. You can put what's known as Dado Blades on it, and then you can cut some bigger... let's see how I can explain it. Some mortise rabbits and things like that, where you might not have. We'll be talking about router here in a minute, but you can make some larger cuts in the wood in one pass.
In one pass, yeah. And so, like, just for instance,
like channels.
Channels, yeah. A dado is a channel. It's used to join two pieces of wood together. It actually cuts a notch in the wood, which allows you to either, do generally a combination of glue and screw, as they say. Put glue in it, put a screw in it to hold it in, clamps it in place. Makes for a much more secure mount. But the dado blade is a series of blades, and it just allows you to do it in one pass, and it gives a very, very precise cut against. So that's one of the other things. You can do other things with it as well. You can put any kind of blade that you can put in a circular saw in it. It's just a little bit different. I've never seen anybody cut masonry with them, but I know it can be done. I have seen metal cut on them. Same thing. You can do that in a circular saw as well. So it's got some variability. What else do we have to say about table saws, John?
Well, it just really is a stable platform to do cuts. I mean, I think we've probably addressed most of what you want to do with it. But, for any of those people out there that really need that kind of ability, table saw is just a tremendous piece of equipment.
All right. What's our next piece we're looking at?
Yeah, so we were going to talk about a power miter saw. This is one of my cutting miters by hand is one of my pet peeves. I know some people can do it great. But you're not one of those guys, are you? I am not that guy. I am not that guy. And I tell you, I think I always say one of the best inventions it seems like that was ever created was a power miter, because you can really get precision miter cuts and chops off of that piece of equipment that you just can't get anywhere else.
Yep. I mean, I know I use mine a lot, even when I'm doing framing. I'll use mine if I've got an extended period where I'll set the saw up, and you get down to that 1/8 inch or below level, and it just makes for a better fit and finish. I mean, even on just framing lumber, I've just found I use it, and you can jig it up. So to help our audience, explain what a miter saw is, John.
Well, when you look around your house in the corners, things are mitered. Okay, that's 240. Let's say that the easiest way to think about it is 245 degrees coming together to form, the 90 degree. Like
in a picture frame.
In a picture frame.
Yep.
Yeah. Perfect example.
Perfect example. The miter saw itself is a saw that has the ability to cut angles in it, and it usually has some kind of it depends what kind you are. There's sliding bevels and things like that. There's a whole series of different ones. But it allows you to cut very precise angles into the wood, even right down to just 90-degree angles, which is what I was referring to when I talk about framing. So I use mine a lot just in 90-degree, but it gives you a very, very precise cut. It allows you, it does have a bed like a table saw, except you would call it a linear bed, meaning it's long. It's generally designed to cut long pieces of stock, not broad pieces of stock. So you're not cutting plywood on it. You're cutting pieces that are probably 12 inches and less, maybe. It depends on the size. There's different sizes.
That's about right.
But it's generally going to be smaller. It's mostly for really, it's a trim saw is really what it is.
Yeah.
But you can adapt it for other applications as well.
You just, to me, it's just when you use something like that and you get real nice miters and cuts, it really does add a lot of professionalism to the look at the end of the project. Otherwise, you just, I've over the years I've tried to do it by hand. I know there's guys out there, and they'll probably write to me and say, "Oh, you know what? You're not the craftsman," that kind of thing. Oh my goodness! But
No, I'm
no,
not.
I'm not.
As a matter
so,
of fact,
yeah,
I'm a handyman.
So I'm
I'm
too
not
anxious. So I don't have the patience sometimes. But when you're doing crown molding and all those kind of things, that you just something like this just really adds to the look at the end of the project is unmatched.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, even just trimming out a door, which is relatively
Absolutely.
simple. I mean, the 45-degree angles are relatively simple, which is what you use on a door frame, right?
Yep,
Generally,
yep. Around windows
and around windows and around almost everything is a 45-degree on some type of a kind of flat stock, we'll call it. Might have some motion to it or some contour to it, but it's basically flat stock. But the 45-degree angles, when you get it done right, there's no gaps. You don't need as much caulk. It just looks better. It's just a better job. And then you can just go from there. What other applications are there for a miter saw, John?
Well, when I use mine, I use it. I'll cut a lot of different materials with it. Now, I don't generally change out the blade on that thing.
Not too often.
No, but there's a lot of new materials that have hit the market that we use for a lot of wood rot, the plastic type of PVC. That this thing is just tremendous at cutting.
Yes, very fast. Fast and easy. And actually, you almost have to change the blade out to do it really well, but I don't do it. I just do it with my regular one.
Right.
It seems to work fine. I've never noticed a difference. And somebody will write me on that one, too. Oh, you need to put the special tooth blade on there. I'm sure we'll hear it. But you can cut metal with them, too. I have seen,
Yeah.
I've put metal blades on mine in the past.
Absolutely.
If I'm doing a big run, generally.
So to that point, Larry, is that if you're doing plumbing and if you're actually working with regular pipe,
Regular pipe PVC or?
No, regular steel pipe.
Steel pipe, yep.
If you're cutting things like that, boy, have at it with that thing.
Yep.
Put
Does
a
it
metal
fast.
blade on it
Put a
and
metal
just
blade
go
on
through, and it's nice and quick and clean.
Yep. Super. All right. Cool. Anything else on miter saws? Price range. How much? What kind of money are we looking at?
Here once again, anywhere from probably $130 to, sky's the limit. Buy a decent one. There's going to be a difference of the quality components, let's say, of how the saw itself is held on its base.
Yes. And also the precision.
For accuracy.
Yeah, and a good locking mechanism on the angles and things like that is kind of critical.
So it's not worth saving, $20 or $30. Spend the money, get a good one. You won't be dissatisfied with the results.
Good one probably starts about $250. Decent one.
Oh yeah.
Maybe a little more.
I mean, there's all kinds, the sliding ones, more of a radial, an arm type of thing where you can cut bigger pieces of wood.
Right. Right.
Which I wish I had right now, because I have run into that situation where, especially when you're cutting on an angle, you lose distance on the wood.
Right.
And
that pesky physics, or no, geometry, excuse me.
Yes. Oof. Yes, and that was that's kind of thing you might want to think about, because if you're working with 2x6s and 2x12s, then
makes a difference.
It's gonna make a big difference. So
yeah.
You'll see these things they're sitting on it looks like two round rods, and you just slide that thing out. It's really a nice piece of equipment.
Yep.
So,
all right, well, outstanding. We wanted to discuss a little bit about cleanup.
Yes. So, if you're using these kind of tools,
I don't care if you're using these tools, if you're doing anything around the house, in my opinion, but
it's going to get messy. And one of the things, and I need to buy a new one, okay? And that is a shop vac. These things are great.
So differentiate a shop vac away from, what's the difference between a shop vac and your vacuum that you clean your house with?
Well, they're meant to be very powerful, and they pick up just about anything. You don't want to run nails, screws, metal shavings, anything like that through your vacuum.
Right.
So you can, don't even think about that.
And don't think about the cat. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, right. Right.
Or the dog.
But the shop vac's strong enough to pull out all the coins out of your couch.
That's right.
especially now, especially now that the holidays are coming up.
That's right. Yeah, it's a great way to make a little extra money. What's one of the other? Almost all shop vacs that I've seen also do what, John? They pick up water or liquid, don't they?
That is a good point. Yeah, so they're known as wet and dry, and you can pick up water. So if you have a flood, if you have a leak, there is nothing like having a shop vac to
just pick it up
quick. Pick it up quick and get that mess out.
Yeah.
I mean, I had a neighbor of mine who's had a leak in their basement, and she came over crying, and what am I going to do? And I turned off the water, ran back over there with my shop vac, and sucked about 50 gallons of water out of her basement
in no time.
In no time.
And
yeah. I had a small vac. I got a small old vacuum, and it worked great, but it seemed like I was running out the door every couple of minutes.
That's a lot of water.
It was a lot. It was a lot of water. It was a lot of water, but it really saved that basement because it got it out of there before it got
too far in.
That's correct, because when water hits, it's going to start to climb up walls and everything.
Yep.
Osmosis, right? And it's
there you go with scientific terms
again.
Look at that.
Man,
Johnny.
So it will just keep wicking up. So yeah, that's a good point though. That's a very good application for that.
Yeah. So point being, it's a very versatile. It's very, very versatile. Generally, my experience has been they come with two hose sizes. One is like 1 7/8 or something like that. The other one's like 2 1/2, or it's in that range. They come in two sizes. There's a bigger one and a smaller one. I personally have the bigger one. You can choke it down to the smaller size, but my shop vac, I've got a pretty big one. John? Let's talk about some of the differences in size. What are the differences in size in shop vacs, and what does it mean to a person besides storing the freaking thing?
Well, yeah. So it's really they come as horsepower ratings, and that's. When you folks go out and you look at these things, they'll generally be from less than a horsepower all the way up to 5 or 6 horsepower.
6, yeah.
And those are pretty good size. That's a pretty good sized motor in there. And the other thing that they do is they can reverse them if you put the hose on the other side, and you can use them as a blower.
That's right.
So I know that there's a lot of applications of be able to blow out your gutters with them, stuff like that. But
we'll talk about electric blowers later. But anyway, keep going.
But that is how they're rated. As a horsepower rating. So and then they get then there's the size of the
canister size.
The canister.
Yeah. How big is it?
Right.
Yep. And how much stuff does it pick up?
Right.
And they come anywhere, at least the ones I've seen, anywhere from about like maybe a half a gallon or a gallon size, pretty small, all the way up to 25 gallons?
Yeah. Well,
there's some you can stick on 55-gallon drums. I mean, which are
right.
huge, but
right.
And I think those are basically the big differences. That's kind of what I wanted to talk about, was just the size, because the size is the horsepower is dependent upon the size of the canister, largely, not always, but generally on the size of the canister. The bigger the canister, the more horsepower you get, and thus the more ability to pick up great volumes of stuff. So like John was talking about when he was vacuuming up water, he had a relatively small canister. If you were doing a lot of water vacuuming, you'd really want a big canister, because water picks up very, very quickly, and you fill that thing up. And it does, by the way, shut off, because it has a float valve in there that shuts that thing off before it gets too far in. But anyway, that's neither here nor there.
Yeah, but if you get one, I'll just say this about it: if you get one, make sure that it does have the ability to pick up water.
Yeah, it's really a plus.
Most of them do, because you're going to find yourself, if you ever have an emergency, this thing is invaluable to mitigate that.
Yep. And it's not only emergencies. I mean, sometimes I find myself doing it to pick up just spills. We'll just call it. Yeah. If it's out, I pick up a spill. It's just easy. It's just simple. One of the things that I wanted to discuss about them is they do come with filtration systems, and so there's there's a large number of different filters that you can get for these things, and it all depends on what you're actually trying to pick up. So they have what they call general purpose filters, which are things for like sawdust and metal shavings and things things of big caliber. If you're going to vacuum up a lot of, say, drywall dust or something like that, you want to get a filter that is designed for drywall dust, because the drywall dust will pass through that general filter and it will ruin your motor on your vacuum, and it also just pushes the dust back out in the air. So you kind of end up creating more of a mess if you don't buy the right filtration or filter for it.
And that's a good point, because one of the things you really have to be careful with is, especially if you're picking up concrete dust. Concrete dust will eat up a motor.
Yep.
And if you have the wrong filter on it, that motor's not going to last at all. So.
And they also make HEPA filters for them as well. So a HEPA filter is the biggest. It's 99.9% filtration or 99.8% filtration. If you have to pick up any kind of hazardous material, anything like that, lead, anything that's dusty that's potentially hazardous, HEPA filters will actually take that out of the air and leave it in the container. It'll collect mold and allergens and dust and all that kind of stuff and won't get through. What are the downsides to using those tighter filters, John?
Well,
they clog.
They clog and they're expensive.
Yep.
So if you're using them for the wrong application, you're kind of throwing your money away on that. But if you're using them for the right application, they have that purpose.
Right. And when you're vacuuming liquid too, generally take those
filters off.
Yep.
Take the filters out, and the instruction. The other thing that's really nice, and so if any of you folks out there have a shop, one of the nice things about a shop vac like that is that the amount of suction that these things can create. You can use PVC and pipe around your shop, and put the vacuum cleaner on one side of the PVC, and you have access to vacuum all over your shop.
It's really cool without moving the canister.
Without moving the canister, so you can just plug in anywhere, and it's PVC pipe is cheap, so you can just
plug it in around your custom
shop.
Vacuum, right?
Exactly, and you can make little vacuum restrictions and boxes and things like that, where if you do some occasional painting or anything, you have kind of a downdraft table.
There you go. It'll suck a bowling ball out of the closet, I've heard.
They're powerful.
All right, so that's a little bit on shop vacs. What else do we think's important, John?
Well, the other thing I had on my list, and I know that you've used it, is a router. So, Larry, what do you tell us a little bit about your experience with using a router? I know that you just had some door work. Yeah,
so a router is designed to basically make, we'll call it deep cuts, and it's designed to cut at specific depths. So what it is it's a rotary blade. It basically is a round blade. You can cut in many multiple different shapes with a router. You can do, like all your trim work and things are cut by router blades. They're just cut in a factory, usually on a router blade. But what I've used it the most for, I have a handheld router that I take with me out on the job. It happens to be cordless, so it works really well. But when let me ask you this, folks. Have you ever had a door where the deadbolt does not shut? It catches the door as it goes in? This is where I use a router, probably 9 out of 10 times. Mm-hmm. So I'll take that hole and I'll make that hole a little bit bigger with my router. I set the depth to the depth of the actual where the bolt goes in, and I can cut with great precision. Actually, I can cut with great precision. Cut that thing right out, and then we fix it. It goes right back to working the way it's supposed to. Generally they haven't worked from when they installed the door 9 out of 10 times. At least that's been my experience. And so if the guy had a router, he would have had it fixed up from day one. But that's what I use them for. I also use it for if I have to remove large quantities in like thin amounts. Say, if I'm going down to 1/8 of an inch or something, I can take out large areas. Or if I have to set I also use it for hinges on doors too. I have a jig that actually will take out the hinge mount, makes it the perfect depth of the hinge. In goes the hinge, done.
Yeah, and these things come with a bunch of different tips. There's a boatload of these things.
A boatload.
That makes a different
shape
profile on a piece of wood. And when you look around your house, you'll see all kinds of fancy little nuances on the side of your wood and carvings and things like that. Those are done with a router. And you can take a router. You can buy a table for the router, so it actually comes up through the bottom, and you can run wood over that router.
Right. You can create your own trim work.
And it works like a charm. These things are invaluable if you're doing a lot of trim work, doing doors, anything like that.
Anything where you have to get a precision depth cut.
Absolutely.
And of limited, you can make. We had talked earlier about dados. You can take a dado and you can cut a dado in if you need to make a fine joint.
Mortise and all and tendons and all those kind of things can be cut very, very easily with these.
Yep.
And I use them to make some furniture and things like that. So I'd encourage everybody to take a look at a router.
Price range?
Well, here once again, I know it sounds like a broken record, but
it's a broken record.
But these things are what we have because for our job.
Right.
We have cordless ones, and ours are more what you might refer to as a trim router, so that it's smaller, it's a little lighter duty, and then you can get some big routers to do heavier
jobs,
work,
right?
That you might want to put on a table and those kind of things. So they go from, your question was how much? So they go from anywhere from $60 to
many hundreds,
many hundreds,
maybe in the thousands.
Right. So yeah, that's a little bit of what I think the price range is. I would say for a really decent router, it's probably about $150.
Yeah, that's about right. Our cordless ones are pretty good. They were sub 100.
They were sub 100, and they work. This thing works great.
Yep.
For what it's intended to do, it has saved us a lot of time on a job site. We did that threshold, and I just turned that edge of that piece of oak over that sharp edge, and routed that down like crazy. It turned out great.
So John's referring to, we did a job together where we're actually replacing a door threshold. We actually replaced a lot. It was a long story, but anyway, we replaced a door threshold and we put a piece of oak under it. And as you know, oak boards have a very sharp edge. Well, to take that edge off, you're faced with a couple of options. One is you could sand it. That would take, this piece was about 6 feet long, 5 feet long? It was pretty long. So for quality, both combination of quality and speed, John took the router and just ran a rounding edge down the edge and just put a beautiful round edge all the way down. Came out, it looked like it was right off the saw, right off the saw that way. It looked perfect. Yeah. And it would have taken you probably 2 hours to do it with sanding.
And it wouldn't have looked half.
And it wouldn't have looked anywhere near as good. In this case, it took him about 10 minutes maybe, and that includes setting up the router, which probably took more time than the actual cut.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's some of the things that you can do with the router. Mm-hmm. And so it also brings, it brings us to our next topic, because we were just talking about sanders. Got to have some kind of way to sand, right?
Right. Absolutely. For the homeowner and for most projects. Now, in all my experience, I've gotten away with a belt sander and a dual action sander, or a random orbit sander, if you will. And then I've just had like a little, what I used to refer to as a jitterbug.
Yep.
And
so these are power sanders.
These are power sanders, and they accomplish almost all of the tasks that you probably need. I have a cordless dual action sander, random orbit sander, that is tremendous. That thing, I use that all the time, and it does a tremendous job. And this is a sander that goes around in a circle, but it also kind of dances itself back and forth. So you really want to start these things, you've got to put them on the work first and then start them up, and they work great. A belt sander is just that.
It's just what it says. It's a belt.
It's got a big belt, and it goes around in a big loop, and it's designed to take off a lot of material quickly.
Yep.
I've used that. You'll see that on flooring. You'll see that on big projects that you really want to remove a lot of material quickly.
Right.
So, one's designed for more of a finishing, the other one's designed to really get down and dirty.
Shape, if you want to call it that. Yeah.
Right.
And sanding, so sanding encompasses a lot of different things. So if I have what do I have? What would you call it? Just a random orbit? It's not an orbital sander. It's just a regular vibrating sander.
Right.
And I use that a lot for just finishing drywall. It allows me to get get in with. I hand sand it first, usually with it, and then I'll just do a finish sand on it with the sander. It just speeds things up a lot. You can do a lot of sanding. The best sanding can be done by hand, but that's at very, very fine levels. When you want to take off a lot of material rapidly, that's what we're talking about, getting into a finishing sander. And the orbitals that John's talking about will actually do fantastically fine work.
It depends upon absolutely, and it depends upon what kind of paper that you attach to it.
Right. The actual sandpaper itself.
I've got sandpaper all the way at 12,000 grit, and so you can really do some polishing with something like that. But most of around the home, 160 to 320 grit, and you're good to go. Well, I think that's going to wrap it up for our tools edition. Is there anything else we wanted to add, John? No, I think that's it. I mean, like you said, I think we could go on for hours and hours on tools
for days.
We've gone now for quite some time right now, and just wanted to say have a Merry Christmas here, and take a look at some of these tools.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, if you've enjoyed this podcast and have derived some value from it, here's 4 things you can do. 1, tell your friends about this podcast. 2, hit subscribe on your podcast player. While you're there, leave us a review. 3, subscribe to our newsletter by going to handymanprosradioshow.com and click on the subscribe button. We'll inform you of upcoming events, shows, and give you actionable tips for maintaining your home and property. And 4, send us an email with your questions to questions@handymanprosradioshow.com. That's handymanprosradioshow.com. That's our show for this week. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next week on the Handyman Pros Radio Show.